Any talk about respiratory diseases would be incomplete if we did not spend some time discussing the common cold. The common cold has many different causes. There are over 200 different viruses that have been shown to cause the common cold. Some common ones include rhinovirus, coronavirus, adenovirus, and respiratory syncytial virus. Of rhinovirus alone, there have been over 99 different serotypes or subspecies of rhinovirus identified that can cause the common cold. Common cold can be transmitted, whatever virus is causing it, can be transmitted through direct contact or through droplet contact or through indirect contact. So I could sneeze on something and then hand it to you, and then you can contract it from me passing you the inanimate object or the fomite. Some of the symptoms associated with the common cold should be familiar to everyone who's alive. Sneezy, scratching throat, running nose. If they're a child, oftentimes there's a low-grade fever, just enough to get the parents really worried about the child's well-being. You know how that goes if you're a parent. So let's look at the common cold. There are many different causes of the common cold. It can be spread very easily. The best way to prevent the common cold is just practice good hygiene. It won't prevent it 100% of the time, but it will certainly reduce the transmission rate. We are going to see the common cold most commonly in individuals that have poor hygiene. So if we look at preschool and elementary school children, those young kids are going to have 3 to 8 colds every year. As time progresses and they've been exposed to more and more subtypes or serotypes of these viruses that are in their region, the incidence rate will drop off. And the incidence rate also continues to drop off as they start to practice better hygiene or better hand washing techniques. So, moving on, we have sinusitis. This is the inflammation of the sinuses. Sinusitis, like the common cold, is also caused by various viruses, but sinusitis, unlike the common cold, can also be caused by various bacterial species, various fungal species, or allergies and or just structural abnormalities. To treat inflammation of the sinuses, we're going to use broad spectrum antibiotics if it's bacterial-based infection, and antifungals if it is a fungal-based infection. Fungal-based infections can also be treated with surgically removing the fungal growths from the sinuses as well. So here is our summary slide for sinusitis. It can be caused by viruses, bacteria. It's worth emphasizing that when sinusitis is caused by bacteria, oftentimes it's going to be a mixed infection, typically manifesting itself as a biofilm. And then finally, there's a wide cocktail of fungi that can cause sinusitis. If it's a viral-based version, we typically don't treat it. If it's bacterial-based, we use broad-spectrum antibiotics. And if it's fungal-based, we physically remove the fungus and we'll also use antifungals. Typically, if we see the fungal version of sinusitis, we are going to assume that that patient has been immunocompromised. Fungal-based versions of sinusitis are rather rare. Viral and bacterial are much, much more common. We could also have acute otis media, aka an ear infection, is what most people would call this. Acute otis media is going to be a viral infection of the upper ear, and this can lead to inflammation of a eustachian tubes, buildup of fluid, and bacterial multiplication in the fluid. Most ear infections are going to start off, and by most I mean the vast majority, start off as that viral-based infection. And then as the fluids build up, bacteria begin to reproduce within the fluids. The triggering event that leads to the buildup of fluid in the middle ear is the inflammation of the eustachian tubes. And as those eustachian tubes become inflamed, they become pinched off, and we are no longer able to drain fluid out of our middle ear, where we have the incus malleus and stapes. Excuse me, the malleus, incus, and stapes. I said them out of order there. My bad. So there's a wide variety of viruses and bacteria, and these are oftentimes going to lead to a biofilm of bacteria growth. If that biofilm of bacteria grows within the middle ear cavity, oftentimes there'll be chronic otis media or chronic ear infections. To help prevent an ear infection from occurring, you can administer Prevnar or Hib. Generally speaking, most treatment options involve watchful waiting, which is a nice way of saying we don't really do anything, we just keep an eye on it, we keep watching it. If the ear is examined and we find that the ear tympanic membrane of the ear is opaque and we cannot see any of the auditory ossicles, the malleus, incus, or stapes, through the tympanic membrane, that's a good sign or a big red flag that that middle ear cavity is filled up with some bacterial growth and that it's an ear infection worth going to the doctor for so you can get an antibiotic prescription. If you have one of those kits at home that you can look in your child's ear with, and you look in their ear and you can see their auditory ossicles through their eardrum or tympanic membrane, then the ear infection has not progressed to the point that there's high bacterial counts and antibiotics aren't going to be prescribed because they will not be worthwhile. In cases of chronic ear infections, we can actually perforate the eardrum / tympanic membrane by putting tympanic membrane tubes, aka tubes in my ear. I recall when I was younger, I had tubes put in my ear, and for a couple years after that, I could close my mouth, plug my nose, and blow really hard and actually have air shoot out of my ears and bubbles come out of my ear when I was in a swimming pool because I'd build up the air pressure in the back of my throat. The air would move through my eustachian tubes and then move out from my middle ear to my outer ear. It was a fun trick when I could do it. So here we can see a diagram of the ear. We have our outer ear with the external auditory canal. We have the tympanic membrane. And if this eustachian tube becomes inflamed and pinched off, we can have a buildup of pressure right here in the middle ear cavity as that liquid filled with bacterium pushes against the tympanic membrane and makes it difficult to see the auditory ossicles, that malleus, incus, and stapes, if you were to examine the middle ear using a visual probe. So to review otis media can be caused by a combination of viruses and bacteria. Common bacteria include Streptococcus pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenzae, and then the cocktail of other viruses and bacteria. Generally speaking, to treat, we are going to use antibiotics if it's bacterial based. If it is not bacterial based, we take the wait and see approach. Another disease of the respiratory tract is diphtheria. Diphtheria is caused by Corynebacterium diphtheriae. Corynebacterium diphtheriae is a non-spore-forming, gram-positive, club-shaped bacterium. This bacterium is transmitted through droplet contact, through direct contact, and through fomites as well. Diphtheria exotoxin is quite virulent. It's capable of making a non-virulent form of Corynebacterium diphtheriae become a virulent form of Corynebacterium diphtheriae. This diphtheria exotoxin will begin transcription and translation within the bacterium once the bacterium is invaded by the appropriate bacteriophage to make it pathogenic. We are typically going to use Tellarite medium to culture this bacterium, and if we see gray-black colonies growing on the Tellarite medium, that's going to be positive for Corynebacterium diphtheriae. We can prevent diphtheria from occurring if we vaccinate ourselves against it. There is a diphtheria toxoid vaccine, TTAP or DTAP. This DTAP is a vaccine that's based off of the toxin that's secreted that makes the diphtheria so virulent. And if we are able to bind antibodies to this diphtheria exotoxin, then we are going to be able to neutralize the exotoxin and not experience any of the symptoms. To treat an infection of diphtheria or Corynebacterium diphtheriae, we are going to use an antitoxin. So we're going to use some antibodies that are designed specifically to bind to the exotoxin. And we're also going to use some broad spectrum antibiotics of penicillin and erythromycin. To summarize, diphtheria is caused by Corynebacterium diphtheriae. It is going to release an exotoxin, and to treat this disease, we use antibiotics plus antitoxins, and to prevent it, we are going to get a vaccine. That's all we have for this section, class. If you have any questions for me about this material, please feel free to post them on the class discussion board or shoot me an email. Happy studies.